Hello there. This morning I'm just going to go through a few of the things I've found out about making box cards, and this comes from a couple of requests fairly recently on my blog. So I thought it might be interesting to go through a few of the principles. I'm not actually going to give you hard and fast measurements, so it's not really a tutorial as such, it's just going through the way I go about making a box card. And the very first thing you need to think about is the design of it. Who's it for? What's the occasion? What sort of embellishments you're going to be using? What colours? What materials? All of that sort of thing. You've got to get that quite clear in your mind. It helps you when you come to put the box card together to just get straight into it and you know what you're doing. A couple of times I've made box cards from scratch without really thinking about what I'm doing, and I've found that the embellishments that I've added just clashed with each other and looked awful, so it's actually gone in the bin. And there can be quite a bit of work, so it's best to think about it. The very first thing you really need to think about is the type of cardstock, and this is absolutely crucial to the success. I wouldn't use anything under about 180 GSM. I prefer 240 GSM. And there's plenty of that sort of weight card, but it's not only the weight, it's also the consistency. It has to be able to fold and bend without cracking, and it has to be able to be adhered without becoming contorted or distressed by the adhesive that you're using. So you need to think about your adhesives. I tend to use a Helmer acid-free glue, which is it's sort of like a tacky glue. It's quite liquid. I've got it in my fine liners, so I don't use too much. There it is, and it's quick drying too, which is quite good. I also use a good double-sided adhesive tape when I need to, if I've got an embellishment that might need a bit more oomph. What is going to adhere? I've had problems in the past finding adhesives that actually work well with acetate. Sometimes if you put something extending up out of the box and you use acetate for the posts, like perhaps with a butterfly or something like that you want, or a hot air balloon that you want to appear suspended, sometimes I've had trouble. Several of the adhesives I've had in the past simply don't work. I've found, however, that the red line double-sided tape tends to work pretty well. It tends to really stick, whatever it is, to the acetate post. So just think about your adhesives as well. So these papers are great, perfect for the Brother scan and cut, and a lovely weight. So anything between, say, 180 and 240 is a wonderful weight for a box card. You don't want the box card to fail to support the embellishments that you put upon it, nor do you want it to collapse or fall about. You want it to sit sturdily on its shelf while it's being admired and enjoyed, and then into the bin. They're just paper after all. Now I'll show you this little box card that I made from a piece of that so named 5x7 paper. It's just a simple little one. It's just using a whole sheet of that 5x7 and dividing it up into equal portions, so it becomes a square shaped box. Each of the sides are equal, and you can see up inside there's about 1/2 inch of a tab that actually holds it together. She wanted a card that had vintage cameras and landscapes. It must be for somebody who likes photography, I guess. The only prompts I had for this was vintage cameras and landscapes. So I pulled out some photos of my own and used them as the landscape portions. and there's a third one on the back on a little Polaroid frame. And then these images I just simply got off the web. I found images of cameras. You can see them there. Several different sorts. This one with a bird was an Ephemeris Vintage Garden digital download. I also have a wonderful collection of images from the Graphics Fairy, and I found some in that, but they were like this, sort of more sketchy, and I quite like these look like real cameras, and so I've used those. A little bit of film strip on the side, and because I didn't know whether it was for a man or a woman, I've just kept it all fairly neutral. So that's a little one, but this one actually has a frame, and I don't know if you can see it there. When you fold it up, go that way, when you fold it up, the frame collapses. Then when you open it up, you simply push on the top, and the frame reappears. And in this one I simply cut a rectangle from the front, and this first panel here, which actually doesn't have any cameras on it, forms the picture behind that little frame. So there's lots of things you can do. This one doesn't want to fold that way, but it folds very comfortably that way. And just push down the frame and insert it into the envelope. Right, now how do we measure up the size? How do we decide? And I must admit, I use a lot of scraps of cardstock, things I've used depending on, so this one for example is almost, it's a 12 by 12 sheet and it's almost 6 inches. This would be plenty big enough to make quite a nice box card. However, I thought we'd just demonstrate a quick one. I like to use white if I'm just making a standard box. It's nice and bright and anything can be attached to it. So what I thought I might do is just show you quickly how I work it out. So this is 11 by 8.5. It's a letter size piece of cardstock. And to work it out, I think, how big do I want it? I don't want it to be very huge. I want it to be nice and neat and small. So I think I'll go with 2.5 inches, and I apologise for the metric inch dyslexia that's going on here, but I've got some tools that are metric and some tools that are inches, and so I have to swap between them. So I think I might make the base 2.5 inches and the little flaps 2 inches. So that makes 4.5 inches that I need the cardstock to be, and I've cut that out already, so that's 4.5, and that's what's left. This is perfect for making the inserts and the posts, or you can use it for another purpose. Instead of making this one just each of the sides 2.5, I'm going to make the back and the front panels wider and the side panels more narrow. So we're going to start at 3.5, and that's going to be the back. Then we want 1.5 for the first side. Then 1, 2, 3.5 for the front. And then 1.5 for the second side. So you just divide it up however you want it. That's given me 1 inch for a tab. I could have cut that down and made these sides a little longer, but for the sake of expediency. Now we want this, the height of the bottom part of the box to be 2.5 inches, and this top flap 2 inches, so that the flaps are a little narrower than the top. But we must take great care, this is the back part of the box, not to score across that. You want that to remain rigid. So we'll start from this end where the tab portion is, and we'll score it at 2.5 inches all the way across to that first score line. And there we have it. that's all the scoring we need to do. We'll start at the tab end, and we'll just give that tab, this is the bottom of the box here, this is the top, and we need to cut that little top portion out, and you need to cut off the score line, so you trim it like so. Now that's given us a tab, and these three are the flaps. So we need to separate them from each other, and to do so I actually like to work on the back because I like to cut off these little lines where the score lines are. So I cut first on the left side of that little hummock that's left by the score tool, and then I go in with the scissors and cut carefully along the right side of that little hummock. And you can see the sort of distance it leaves, but all it means is those little flaps will fold. Of course, if you're cutting these out on your cutting machine, you don't need to worry about this because the machine will already be programmed to make that. But truly, you can make perfectly wonderful box cards without an electronic cutting machine. And you don't need to use scissors, you can use your paper trimmer, you can use craft knives, you can use whatever you've got. Now that's all the cutting we need to do. I'll just grab my score tool and fold these down. Then go through and fold the sideways folds. Making sure that they're all nice and straight. And there's the tab, and you can see that's made a little more of a rectangle shaped box. It's narrower than it is wide. It's wider than it is deep. To measure the inserts for this box, you simply need to measure these. So whatever these are, these were 1.5 and this was 3.5. You then cut your insert strips from the remaining pieces that you've got. And there you go, that's the basis of your box card. Now I've got another little one here that it's been sitting in my box for ages, and you might be able to see it has a score across the back. This is the same type of paper, the same size as this one. I think it's even the same depth. Yes, it is. It's a very comfortable size for me to make. And I might just go ahead with this one and show you, because it's got the damaged back. It's just going to be a demonstration one. It's not going to have any other value. But even if you do make a mistake and put a score line, you might be able to disguise it by using some panels. Now, normally what I would do is, remembering that this is the outside and this is the inside, is decorate these panels and mat them. Just give that another press, because it's much easier to do while the thing is flat. Now this little one I made, because I've got the fold there, and I said you can disguise that if you're careful. I've made another little frame just with a rectangle cut out from a scrap of paper, and I can adhere that to the back, and that will cover that and strengthen that fold and also disguise it so it won't be a visual issue. Now for these mats you can use absolutely anything, as colourful or as focused as you like. I've just kept things extremely simple and fairly monochromatic here, just to demonstrate the possibilities. So I'll adhere that little panel with the butterfly on it to the back, so that's covered up that score line, strengthened the back. So that's that bit decorated. I've also cut out another little sentiment panel for the back, and these little frames just from a little frame die that fits the panels. Not exactly, they're not perfectly sized, but just to put a little bit of colour onto these little panels, and try to centre those as best I can. This glue is excellent, it dries clear. You understand, if I was making this to use as a card, I would spend quite a bit more time getting things exactly straight and exactly in the position I want them. It just needs a tiny bit more glue on top. What I really wanted to show with this little example is they certainly don't need to be complicated. And of course, when you first start off with things, you often want to make them more complex because you see one that someone else has created and you think, oh, I can do that, and you have a go. And sometimes it doesn't always work out. So my advice would be initially just to keep things as simple as you can, because that way you learn what's going to work for you. I'll just adhere that on the back. I've just doubled up that frame, and again that little frame on the back will help to disguise that score line. Now you don't have to leave it square, you can use punches, corner rounders, you name it, to give you the look that you want. And you know what I've done? I've put that panel on and made a mistake because I really should have put this panel on, adhered it together. So there's a prime example of not thinking it through. Let me just see if I can quickly lift that. It's going to be down in the box and you're not really going to see it particularly. But, you know, you and I will both know, won't we? Let me see if I can just slide that in. Yes, that'll work. So I'll just put some adhesive on that. That's one time when you need to think about your matting. Is there anything you need to join up before you mat a section? And in this case there wasn't. I didn't stop to think it through. So that's got that underneath the mat, and now all I have to do is put a little bit more adhesive back up underneath that mat. And you can see in there how that mat covers the edge of the little joiner tab. And if you look down inside, it's lovely and neat in there. Okay, so that's the box. It folds nicely. a little bit of colour on it. It pays to fold them both ways just to make sure that you've got the edges square. But if you've taken the time to remove those little tiny strips between the tabs, it should fold beautifully. Any little discrepancies will be hidden. Now, what I've got to decorate this, I'll just put my lid on that because I don't want it to block. What I've got to decorate this is I found this little pack of three-dimensional stickers at our local reject shop, and normally I don't buy stickers at all, but I thought these were rather sweet. And I found, when I pulled them off, they're really a bit thick to use in a box card. They've got, you might be able to see there, they've got a panel of double-sided tape there, they've got another one between the two images, and they've got one on the back. However, I found by just putting my heat tool on them for just a couple of seconds, I could separate them and divide them up into little flatter ones. They've still got the dimensional foam on the back, and I'm going to leave that there because that'll give me a little bit of dimension, which will look quite nice. So I've cut some strips of paper into little posts, and these are to adhere the cacti on. And I've cut 2 panels to make the inserts. Now, to work these out, and it depends how deep your box is. Normally for a box this size I would only put 2 dividers and maybe a front panel. I'll talk about the front panel in a minute because that's quite simple. For the 2 dividers you need the width of the box plus how far do you want them to come forward from the back or go back from the front, because they're tabbed on the side and that's what gives you the distance. And for this one, I think I've just left them at, let me see, these were 2.5 inches. Let me get the scoreboard out and we can check this exactly. I'll get rid of that because it's not needed on voyage. Get the scoreboard out. Let's see how I cut these. So I've cut them at 2.5 and 1/2 inch and 1/2 inch. So they're 3.5 inch wide with 1/2 inch on each side for the tab. Now these can both be made the same. We just need to score a 1/2 inch score at each end. So I've got a tab, 2.5 inches, which is the width of the box, and then another little tab of 1/2 inch. And we need 2 of those. Before we fold them, I'll just angle off the top. That just helps with the accommodating the tabs in the box. Now 1/2 inch might be a little wide. If I made a box such as this one that is only 1.5 inches deep, that 1/2 inch tab, you know, it might put, if I put that in there and then put the back one in there, it might make them too close together. So you might need to cut that down to maybe 3/8 or 1/4 inch, just so that you've got room in your box. It depends also on your embellishments. It might be you just want one divider in the middle. You just have to work that out depending on the embellishments that you're using. So there we are, we've got our dividers, and I'll fold them. Oops, don't do that way. Sometimes it helps to make the folds go both ways, because then you can it just assists with the box folding when you've completed it. Now I need another little panel for the front, and this panel doesn't need to have tabs. All it does is slip down inside the front, and it just allows you to put another embellishment right at the front of the box. So I'll just cut myself a piece that is 2.5 inches wide. Here we are, we've got a slightly wonky little strip here. It doesn't matter because that's going to be down inside the box. It's 2.5 inches wide, as long as it's not more than 2.5 inches deep, that will be perfectly fine. Now what I thought I'd do for that is use one of these cactuses. I might use that little one, it's got a heart on it. Find a little strip that's not wider than the base of the, and that little bit of embellishment on the back, I wouldn't trust it because it's a commercial product, it's not my own tape. I don't know how strong it is, so I would never rely on it on its own. I'll put a little bit of extra adhesive on that, and then simply attach the post to the back and let that dry. And you can see, because that's got the dimension, it's going to slightly overhang. So all I need to do is adhere that post so that it's just perched at the top. Make sure I've got the right orientation there. And just adhere that so that the cactus is in the pot is straight, and the edge of that paper is just at the base of the little pot. I can then trim that off. Put some adhesive on this. And slide that down in front of the and just slide it down so it's actually out of sight. Just press that down so that it's adhered nicely inside, and then fold it both ways, and that way you make sure that nothing you've added to this point is going to stop the box from closing. Now this one, this little insert, oops, that's coming off. Let's just hold that for a moment longer. You do need to make sure your adhesive is well behaving itself. Now this little one will go in so, with its tabs on the sides. Now you can see how that's just sitting there. That's because I've got it pretty right. I'll try this one too and see if that one's okay. You put the little trimmed off top of the tab at the top of the box. It just helps disguise. Now you can see they're sort of sitting there. That one's moved because I added the second one, but they'll sit there. They've got enough tension to hold them in place without flopping down into the box, so you know they're about the right size, but they're not so tight that they're actually going to bow, because they're, you know, if they're too wide they will bow and it will be hard to get everything hanging nicely. Okay, so this is the front one, and what can we put on that? Now I'd like to, I might just cut these in half so make sure I've got enough. And I think one of these with the pink, because I want to introduce some more of the pink. Having said I didn't know how adhesive they were, they're certainly still sticky enough, but I'm going to add a little more glue anyway. You really want these things to, you know, you spend a bit of time working on them. You don't want them to just fall apart. You want them to stay put. Now, because we're using a white tab, we really could put it on the front, but I don't like that. I would always put the little holder at the back. And again, position it so that the pot looks as if it's resting nice and straight on the top of the divider. And you know what I've done? I've put it on the wrong side. Never mind. I've put it on the bottom, not the top. So we'll just trim off the tops of those. We won't let that stop us. And I might just only have one on there, I think. Don't want so much glue that it's going to go everywhere, but you want enough to give you a really good bond. Now you simply give this a little bit of a concave twist, slide it down in the box. You don't want adhesive all over the sides of your flap there, and push it forward so that those ends of the flaps are right at the front of the box, and that's what gives you your nice straight lines. Make sure the top of the divider is down out of sight of just the top of the box. You see that one's come off. It didn't like being squidged like that. If we push it that way, that will beat that one into submission. There we have it. So that's the first one in, and the first two little cacti in place. Now this one goes at the back, like so, and I want to put, now what have I got here? I've got this one, which is different, and I've got another one of those, and I've got that one with the slightly brighter pot. So I might put all three if I can. Now I've used this one at the front, so I'll try and put this one at the other side of the box. Put that over this side. Let's move it up so it's right on the edge. This one on this side to get it away from its look-alike there. This one's got an extra panel of adhesive, so I think I'll take that bit of dimensional tape off. If you use your, as I said before, you put it in the sun or use your heat tool, that will fetch it off. That's got it. Now this one, because it goes all the way up, I can put the post up as far as I can on that. I'll give it a bit more strength. One might be a bit wide. I'll use a narrower strip on this. It doesn't run the risk of showing. The longer you can leave these strips behind the panels, obviously the more adhesive you've got, the more strength it's going to have. So just think about that too. Move that over as far as is practical. Now this one, I'll do the same with that. I'll just take that strip off, and that will allow me to run the little post all the way to the top of the little cactus. These are such fun, and it's just amazing how much detail, and you can really load them up as long as you're careful about the weight of your embellishments. You can get some amazing effects, but in all honesty, I have to say I really like the simple ones. You can use stamps, you can use die cuts, you can use punches, you can use all sorts of things. You can use whatever you've got to create a little bit of visual delight to give to somebody. And you know, these are not works of art. They're not meant to be, they don't have longevity. They're meant to be enjoyed, and then when that period of enjoyment is over, into the bin they go. I'm not going to push that one right back. Normally I would push those little tabs right to the back, but in this case I'm not. I'm just going to set them nice and straight in there. It's easy to get them straight if you put them to the back and use the back wall of the box as its guide. But I think that's straight enough. Let me just hold it. There we go. And that's basically done. That's basically all you need to do. You might want to put a word or something on the front. Stamp a sentiment, punch out a word die, put something on. I'll just have a quick look. What else have I got here? Oh, enjoy. Now that's got the same tealy sort of colours. The black would look, have I got a black enjoy? That might look a bit more graphic. I think it does. I might put that on. Just to give it some strength. These are just from pieces of scrap card. I find these, I never just make a box card for the sake of making a box card. I only ever make a box card for a certain person, or a certain, you know, for a certain occasion for that person. And I find that for me, I'm not good at just putting things together without a purpose. I'm sort of a bit too practical for my own good sometimes. And I'll just put a little bit of adhesion there and there. I find these much easier to design, if you like, if I know the person and the occasion I'm making them for. So my advice would be just to start simple if you've never made one before, and just build up your knowledge. The layout, the way it's shaped, and all of those sorts of things, and the size is what's pretty crucial to success. This little one that's quite embellished, quite over the top, but some people like things like that. Again, just made from craft and old book pages and scraps out of my foils and special paper bin. Very over embellished and quite bright, made from fun foam and scraps. The one I made especially for someone wanting a camera box card. The little rabbits that I've used for my grandson, and the simple little demonstration one I made today to show you how I go about it. There we go. That's how I go about my box cards. I don't think I've left too much out. It's all about the paper. Don't use paper that's too soft or doesn't fold. It pays, if you're not sure, to check first. Even some lovely expensive papers can be very unfoldable. They're lovely for all sorts of things, but not for something that needs to be as folded as these. And I include graphic 45 paper in that. I love graphic 45 paper for the colours and the weight, and everything's wonderful, but it doesn't fold nicely for me. So you do have to check and see. Find the right adhesive for the whatever it is you're putting on your embellishments. Don't forget about your punches and your dies, because you can make all sorts of embellishments with those if you have them. Check out stickers if you've got stickers, or if you see stickers, they can be pretty effective. And the other thing is to look on the Google search or whatever your tool is, to find images that you might be able to use, and also your own photographs and other bits and pieces that you've got. So there we go, that's it. Hope you enjoyed this, and happy boxing. I'll see you later.